ridiculed. Okay, so you have to be very careful in terms of a belief system. Okay. Point number 4. It says, we want decent housing fit for shelter of human beings, free healthcare, preventative and maintenance. We want to end to the trafficking of drugs and to the biological and chemical warfare targeted at our people. Now, see, that's the original Panther Party's platform. Keep in mind, the original Panther Party had placed the emphasis on housing rights. And so what they were doing at that time, when they were founded across the country, east to west and everywhere in between, you had many original Panthers that were forming tenant associations. Okay, the tenant associations are very powerful. People, if you live in a building, if you live in a housing complex, and what they were doing, remember, when Martin Luther King had traveled to Chicago, he rented an apartment, and what Dr. King said, that was in 1967, he rented an apartment. He said that the racism up north was worse than the racism down south. He said, because what Black people were dealing with is institutional racism. In other words, they were being offered poor housing conditions, being charged crazy rent for poor housing conditions. And so Dr. King, he wanted to, he wanted to try to get a whiff of that. And so he rented an apartment in 1967. He stayed, that's when he met with Elijah Muhammad. That famous picture you might see, most people don't know that, but that's, and that was actually one of the things that actually caused Dr. King to begin to reassess his own beliefs systems. Okay, so anyway, the original Panther Party, they placed they noticed, as did many Black activists at the time, including Dr. King, that many white landlords were exploiting Black tenants, poor Black tenants. And so, of course, now we're going to get to that, but the second part of that, in that first paragraph, we want to enter the trafficking of drugs into biological and chemical warfare targeted at our people. Now, it's amazing to me, going back 4 years ago, might have been 5 years ago, I wrote an article criticizing Damon Young. He's another journalist, very smart brothers, okay? He's one of the people that started that whole thing about the Hoteps, mocking Afrocentric Black men, okay? And one of the things that he said, and you find articles about Hoteps, they took a word that came out of our tradition, out of the Kemetic tradition, which means peace, and attempted to turn it into an insult. And he said that Hoteps, as he refers to us, that we believe in wild conspiracy theories. And so in my article, I said, well, brother, what wild conspiracy theory are you talking about? I said, are you talking about the Tuskegee experiment? Are you talking about COINTELPRO? Are you talking about the crack cocaine epidemic of the 80s? I said, well, brother, these are not conspiracy theories. These are conspiracy facts, okay? I was supposed to interview Rick Ross, the real Rick Ross, in 2015 or 2016, but unfortunately, he had stood me up. I was supposed to interview him on air, because those of you, Rick Ross was the one that had exposed, in Maxine Waters in the 90s, they exposed the CIA involvement in the crack cocaine epidemic that had plagued Black communities in the 80s into the 90s, okay? Rick Ross, and remember that reporter, the journalist Gary Webb, he was found dead. They ruled it a suicide. They said that he shot himself in the back of the head with a shotgun. That's another story. So, poor housing and drug-infested neighborhoods, crack was definitely dumped into Black neighborhoods. Of course, the original Panther Party at that time, they had already been, before the crack cocaine epidemic, we had heroin that had actually ravaged a lot of Black communities, of course. And as we've seen in the past decade, heroin has made a comeback, if you would, okay? Heroin has made a comeback for whatever reason. So the original Panther Party, as the new Black Panther Party, connected the two. They connected, germ warfare with poor housing conditions. Of course, many people have mentioned HIV and AIDS. Dr. Jack Felder, who had died several years ago, he wrote a book in 1992 investigating the origin of AIDS. And of course, he alleges in the book that it was created primarily to get rid of Black people. Dr. Ali Mohammed, who used to be the National Minister of Health for the Nation of Islam under the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. He's the brother that has the treatment for HIV, Kimron. He's lectured on that, and he's actually showed, he's provided documentation, strong documentation that would suggest that AIDS was created. And of course, you see videos all on YouTube discussing that. And I'm not necessarily saying that YouTube is a good source, but YouTube is a good enough source for you to be able to write down certain things and look up articles and go to the library. Okay, brothers and sisters, please do not depend on YouTube for all of your information. If you're coming in that Panther tradition, in fact, I was just reading something that Che Guevara said this earlier, a few hours ago. He said, every revolutionary, you can't be a revolutionary unless you're an educated revolutionary. And I'm paraphrasing, okay? You have to read. You just can't watch YouTube. You have to read. You have to study. If you're calling yourself coming in the Black Panther tradition, before you were given a gun, when you came to a Panther meeting, you were given a book to read, okay? If you say that you're in the tradition of Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad, Dr. Khalid was very well read. He was an excellent researcher. You say you love Brother Malcolm. Malcolm was very well read. Remember what Minister Farrakhan said about Brother Malcolm? He said that when he was with Malcolm at these white schools, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Brown, he would watch Malcolm, a man who only had an 8th grade education, handcuff men and women who had doctorates. And at the end of these debates, they would invite Malcolm to speak. At the end of these debates, that they would invite Malcolm, they would say to him, Mr. X or Minister Malcolm, what was your alma mater? Your college. He said, I never went. He said, my college was the streets. I never went to college. They couldn't believe it because he was so well read. As Minister Farrakhan pointed out, he read the same things that they read. Okay, he was able to out-debate, as Minister Farrakhan said, men and women who read Socrates and Plato and Shakespeare because he read Plato, Socrates, and Shakespeare. Okay, let us finish with number 4. We believe since the white landlords were still on housing, that's what number 4 is dealing with. We believe since the white landlords will not give decent housing and quality healthcare to our people, to our Black community, the housing, the land, the social, political, and economic institutions should be made into independent Ujamaa, New African Communal Cooperatives. Okay, one of the principles of Kwanzaa, Ujamaa, so that our community with government reparation and aid until we can do for ourselves can build and make drug-free, decent housing with health facilities for our people. Here's something that the Panthers had, the original Panther Party. They used to have the free health clinics, okay? Dr. Mutulu Shakur, he was in the Panther, he's still serving time, political prisoner. He had the acupuncture school. But before that, in the 60s and 70s, the Panthers had the free health clinics. They were bringing Black doctors primarily to give our people examinations and give our people treatment, health clinics. Sometimes it would be a bus, sometimes it would be a small van, a small bus, sometimes it would be a table set up, sometimes it would be in their office. They had the free health clinics. Okay, they had the free health clinics. And once again, that's when they said that, Ujamaa, they had these, the independent Ujamaa, the New African Communal Cooperatives, many of the Panthers, they would have what was called the Freedom Schools, okay, the Freedom Schools. These were free. Oftentimes they were on the weekends, and these were people either our brothers and sisters that were school teachers or they were in school to be teachers, or just, people that were knowledgeable. Panthers would bring in Black people to teach Black children, okay? See, once again, that's self-determination as well. Okay, number 5. Here we go. We're just talking about education now. Number 5, we want education for our people that exposes the true nature of this devilish and decadent American society. We want education that teaches us our true history, herstory, and our role in the present day society. Now, we keep seeing this whole thing with critical race theory. And the problem that I'm having with critical race theory is that a lot of our people are noticing in the media, I work in media, but I'm noticing that a lot of people in the media, including Black people, we keep acting like the erasure of critical race theory is just a conservative thing, a Republican thing. No, you have white liberals that try to whitewash history as well. That's not just a white Republican thing. See, that's why Malcolm told us, he told Black people he said this while he was in the Nation of Islam and after he came back from Mecca, to beware of white liberals. Malcolm said this. Okay, so, white liberals, he said that the conservative is a fox, the white conservative is a fox, and the white conservative is a wolf, and the white conservative is a fox. The fox is sly, the sly fox, very sneaky, whereas the wolf has blood dripping from its jaws and from its teeth. So you know what the wolf is about, but the fox is very sneaky. That's how he described the white liberal. Okay, oftentimes, people, I'm noticing that a lot of Black conservatives will quote Malcolm saying that about the liberals. Malcolm wasn't excusing conservatives. Malcolm was going at both. He was explaining you have to watch liberals more because they're sneaky. Okay, so this whole thing about critical race theory, like I said, you don't just have white conservatives trying to erase the true history of America. You have many white liberals that do that as well. Okay, and oftentimes, I've had the honor of working with many activist organizations, not just in the capacity of a journalist, but as an activist. And I've actually asked this question publicly. I posted this on Facebook. Oftentimes I encounter many white people, just like Malcolm, Minister Farrakhan, the original Panther Party, just like, who come up to me and have told me, listen, I want to end white racism. And, I said, okay, well, fine. Are you willing to go the direction of your brother, John Brown? And that is dismantle a system that you benefit from. Okay. Unfortunately, John Brown, those of us that know about John Brown, unfortunately, he is an anomaly in white America, because most white folks, even the ones that say that they want to end racism, are not willing to take it as far as he and his sons did. Okay. He's an anomaly and a rarity. Okay. And so, there were many white people. Remember the scene, I don't like using the Malcolm X movie, but there was a scene in the Malcolm X movie, in which it was a white woman. She came up to Malcolm and said, listen, I'm not one of those white people that I'm not racist. What can I do? And, to help in racism, Malcolm said nothing. Now, just to let you know, it didn't take place at Harvard. That was a real scene in the autobiography. Malcolm said, when he was the minister of Mosque Number 7, a white woman came in the restaurant that Mosque Number 7 had operated and had asked him that question. He said absolutely nothing, and she walked away. And Malcolm regretted not telling her. He said, Malcolm said that, and I'm paraphrasing, he said, I should have told her, to go into your communities and teach white people about the ills of racism. Okay. Now, of course, you have many Black people that will say that there's really nothing white people can do to end racism, because there are many people that have lost hope for white America or for white people in general. But there are many, such as an O'Malley Yeshiteli, and who actually shared Huey P. Newton's and Kwame Ture's advice, was that, okay, like Malcolm, who shared Brother Malcolm's perspective, is that white people don't need to come to us and discuss racism. Don't go to somebody said, with Joe Biden, don't come to a Black, or these white Democrats, don't come to a Black church and speak to us about racism. Go to a white church and speak to your people about racism. Okay. Excuse me for 1 second. So anyway, we, like I said, we oftentimes find this sneakiness amongst white liberals to try to act like they're our friends, but they have a typical, it's still a white supremacist mindset. Okay. That tells you that you're supposed to rule Black people, okay, or lie about history, or whitewash history. So we're still on number 5. We believe in an educational system that will give our people a knowledge of self. See, that's Nation of Islam language again. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, knowledge of self. Who are you? You are the Black man is the original man. The Black woman is the original woman. God and goddesses of the universe. Knowledge of self. We built civilization. We helped create the universe. Knowledge, that type of knowledge of self. What were we before we came in contact with Europeans? Unfortunately, my biggest issue as a writer, yes, I'm a journalist, but I've actually written pieces dealing with our history, with African history. And my pet peeve with us as Black people, we can't seem to get, when discussing Black history, we can't seem to get beyond slavery or beyond our contact with Europeans. Okay, and this is the reason why Arthur Schomburg, okay, our brother who, when you go to Harlem on Malcolm X Boulevard, look, the Schomburg Center, where, Arthur Schomburg taught so many of our scholars. He taught so many of our scholars. At one time, his library had the largest collection in the world of Black studies. He said, what you refer to as Black history is nothing more than the missing pages of world history. Now, just to remind you what I said a few minutes ago, as we were going into point number 5, that the original Panthers had freedom schools. They had teachers teaching Black children our true history. You know, the few Panthers that did know African history, freedom schools, you saw those primarily on the East Coast. And as I said, most of the East Coast Panthers were very well read in African history, unlike most of the West Coast Panthers, that were primarily educated in communism and Marxism, Leninism, leftist philosophy, although they were pro-Black. Okay, so as a writer, I've written on this subject. The true history of Black people is that we had a history before slavery. We had a history before the coming of Europeans. Okay, and I wrote an article quite some time ago called Africana Studies. Look it up, Dashan Farad. And the article that I wrote was called Africana Studies in the 21st Century and Beyond. It was an updated version of Dr. John Henry Clark's article, Why Africana Studies. And I mentioned in the article how most educated professional Black people cannot name 5 ancient African or Black civilizations, okay? When we as Pan-Africans use the term African, we mean Black. The term African and Black are used interchangeably or synonymously. So if I say African, I'm talking about Black or African. Okay, as a Pan-Africanist in the New Black Panther Party, that remember, if you're a Pan-Africanist, when we say Africa, we don't just mean our brothers and sisters on the continent. Those are continental Africans. We are diasporic Africans, meaning the word diaspora is associated. It came out of the Jewish community, which means the spreading out of the Jewish community as a result of oppression, slavery, domination. Okay. So when we say African, like I said, we use the term African diaspora. The term African diaspora started getting used by Black scholars in the 1950s. Okay, a former professor of mine, Dr. Carlton Wilson, from North Carolina Central University, he actually wrote an article on the subject. Look him up, Dr. Carlton Wilson, like Carlton Banks, Carlton Wilson, African diaspora, and he wrote about it. The scholars, scholars began using that term to describe African people or Black people everywhere. So when I say African, I'm talking about Black people. When I say Black people, I'm talking about Africans. And so in my article, Africana Studies in the 21st Century and Beyond, I mentioned that. How many educated Black professionals can name, I said, can name 5 ancient Black civilizations, okay? Most people don't. You still have most of our people that don't know that ancient Egypt was a Black civilization originally. Most of us don't. Okay, and you have a lot of clowns who claim to be so educated in Black culture, like a Damon Young, and they don't really know nothing. They write all types of erroneous stuff about their own history, but they claim to be pro-Black. Okay. So point number 5, we're finishing off. We believe in an educational system that will give our people a knowledge of self. I said that once again, Elijah Muhammad's teaching. If we do not have knowledge of self and of our position in society and the world, then we have little chance to properly relate to anything else. Now, of course, Dr. John Henry Clark has said that. Dr. Yusuf Inyakinen has said that, otherwise known as Dr. Ben. And by the way, December 31st, we celebrated the birthday of Dr. Yusuf Inyakinen, otherwise known as Dr. Ben. And on January 1st, we celebrated the birthday of Dr. John Henry Clark, two immortal ancestors, Ibae Ashe. Every serious student of Black history should know who Dr. Yusuf Inyakinen and Dr. John Henry Clark are, okay? Among many. There's so many people who have said, who actually embody point number 5. I'm going to read it again. We want education for our people that exposes the true nature of this devilish and decadent American society. We want education that teaches us our true history, herstory, and our role in the present day society. We believe in an educational system that will give our people knowledge of self. If we do not have knowledge of self and of our position in society and the world, then we have little chance to properly relate to anything else. Dr. John Henry Clark taught us that. Dr. Yusuf Yakinen taught us that. Dr. Marimbi Ani taught us that. Dr. Tyreen Wright taught us that. Dr. Francis Cress Wilson taught us that. My sister, Dr. Maya, is teaching us that. I'm sorry, I should have said Dr. Tyreen Wright is teaching us that. She's still with us. Dr. Marimbi Ani, and I mentioned her already, is teaching us that. Excuse me. Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad, another scholar, taught us that. Dr. Leonard Jeffries, Dr. Malefi Asante. By the way, this past Saturday, we had a tribute. We honored Dr. James McIntosh of CEMOTAP out of Queens, New York. That organization hosted a tribute to Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark, and Dr. Malefi Asante and Dr. Leonard Jeffries. They lit it up with presentations, and it was another brother, a younger brother, a teacher, Baba Sango, gave tributes to these brothers. Okay, it was a wonderful tribute. It was on Zoom. I had the honor of attending much of the meeting, if you would. I didn't say anything, of course, but there have been many of our scholars. Sheikh Anta Diop had said this. Sheikh Anta Diop, who wrote the book, The African Origin of Civilization, he said that Black people, he said, if Black people see greatness in ourselves, we would do great things, okay? But there have been many, many scholars, J.A. Rogers, William Leo Hansberry, Kaba Kameni, so many, too many, Professor James Small, there's so many to name, okay? Minister Louis Farrakhan, Dr. Greg Carr, Dr. Akil Kalfani, Dr. Mario Beatty, okay? There's so many to name in this category who embody point number 5, okay? And of course, you know, many of these scholars, Dr. Naeem Akbar, many of these scholars have stated, you know, definitely the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, okay, you know, that's where the whole knowledge of self, you know, comes in, which he got from his teacher, Master Farad Muhammad, knowledge of self. They emphasize that the main reason why Black people in America are in this condition is because we've been disconnected totally from our Black selves, some knowledge of who we are, okay? In terms, you know, knowledge of who we are, who are we? The original people of the planet Earth, Black people, the original people, okay? And so that has been emphasized time and time. And as a writer, me, like I said, I'm a journalist, but I'm also a writer. As a writer, it's still frightening the amount of Black people who cannot name 5 ancient Black civilizations. They can't name anything. They barely know anything here, okay? Now listen, whenever we discuss a Black man inventing a stoplight or the ironing board, or a Black woman inventing the hot comb, a Black man inventing the iron, okay, that's good, okay? But at the same time, you know, that could be considered small in comparison. Whereas other communities, you know, I remember there was a professor of mine, Professor Yusuf Ali, I think it was Professor, he's the one that helped Ivan Van Sertima write that, edit that first book on the Moors, Professor Yusuf Ali. He was a Sister Soldiers professor, Kevin Powell's professor at Rutgers, but I had him at William Patterson. I was very close with him. He had mentioned, he would oftentimes quote Sheikh Anta Diop, and he said that he quoted Sheikh Anta Diop, and I've quoted Sheikh Anta Diop before just a few minutes ago. He said that Black people would never be free until we do what with ancient Egypt, what white people did with ancient Greece. Okay, so always remember, put that into perspective. Okay, so like I said, so we're moving on now. Pardon me for 1 second. Pardon me, family, year-round allergies. Okay, we're on point number 6, and we hope that you, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Uh, Thank you. We hope that you are, like I said, we don't plan to be long. We just have just a few more minutes as we go through the platform, and I'm hoping to get some, not insight, questions or dialogue. So here we go. Point number 6. One second, my screen keeps darkening. I got to figure out how to keep the light on my cell phone. I got to have the setting because it gets dark right away. Point number 6, it says, we want all Black men and Black women to be exempt from military service. Now, the original Panther Party definitely, the new Black Panther Party, although there are differences, they definitely share that. Okay, we believe that Black people should not be forced to fight in the military service to defend the racist government that holds us captive and does not protect us. We will not fight and kill other people of color in the world who, like Black people, are being victimized by the white racist government of America. We will protect ourselves from the force and violence of the racist police and the racist military by any means necessary. That's Malcolm's language. But remember, the biggest example of this here, the most popular case of point number 6, was our brother, the immortal Muhammad Ali, the greatest champion there ever was in boxing. Remember, he said, ain't no Viet Cong ever called me nigger. Remember, he said that. And remember, you could see that in the movie, but that was a real life scene when he was saying, he said, you my enemy, talking about that congressional committee when he refused, when he was a conscientious objector. And he had said that. He said, what did the Viet Cong ever do to me? You my enemy. And there were a lot of Black people that went to jail, not just during Vietnam, but during Korea, World War I, World War II, when they were drafting people. There were a lot of Black people that went to jail, and during Vietnam in particular. It's just that Ali, he gets the biggest attention because of his status. But there were many Black people that were dodging the draft. Some people were going to Canada, some people were staying right here and going to jail because of they felt, why should we fight in Vietnam? And keep in mind, we were discussing Dr. King earlier. One of the things that caused Dr. King to reassess himself was that, remember we were speaking about Chicago? When he went to Chicago and Los Angeles, King was speaking with the gang members, okay? And they were telling Dr. King, look, bro, you're telling us to be nonviolent here against an enemy we see and someone who's oppressing us daily, but they're telling us to go overseas to harm an enemy to harm someone who hasn't done anything to us. Okay, so that sentiment that Ali was expressing, that was nothing new. And so that was one of the things that caused Dr. King to begin to speak against the war in Vietnam. A lot of people don't realize that. And unfortunately, it would get Dr. King, he would get ousted from many of the Black elite circles that he was a part of. Okay, he caught a lot of flack, a lot of, even amongst his colleagues, his own brothers, Black ministers. When he began speaking against Vietnam, they began to walk away from him en masse. There were many Black churches that would not host Dr. King, okay? When Dr. King came to Newark, New Jersey, the week before he was assassinated, most of the Black ministers would not meet with him. There was only one church that he was allowed to speak at. That was Abyssinian Baptist, which is still in existence. That was the last church he spoke in New Jersey, and it was a week before he was assassinated. And that was during the time that he visited Amir Baraka. He visited Amir Baraka at that time, okay? And King, even during that time when he was giving a series of sermons, I believe that sermon he gave at Riverside Church in Harlem, Why I Opposed the War. That was when Kwame Ture was in existence, not in existence, he was in attendance. And I believe that was the sermon that he actually gave props to Muhammad Ali for defying it. But during that time period, he definitely supported Ali. In fact, they met together. You actually see them together. There's several videos of them on YouTube together, and he bigged up Ali for his position towards the war in Vietnam. Okay. Now, of course, you have many Black people who would disagree. This sentiment was actually felt during the time of World War I. Now, keep in mind now, the Civil War, since many of our people, even back then, we thought that Abraham Lincoln had liked us, and we we thought that the Civil War was being fought to end slavery, which it wasn't. It eventually led to the end of slavery, if you would. Okay, but during World War I, many Black people were opposed to fighting in that war. And W.E.B. Du Bois had said, he said, well, look, we have a stake here. He said, we built America, so no, we have to defend America. But there were other Black folk, they're like, no, Du Bois, we're not getting any justice here. So, for the, that sentiment that Muhammad Ali and so many other people expressed regarding killing enemies abroad and not harming enemies here, who we see on a daily basis, okay, that sentiment was already in existence. And of course, Malcolm was actually one of the, Malcolm had said that, as a matter of fact, we have to give props to Malcolm. Malcolm actually was the first one not the first one, but he was I should say, in terms of his celebrity status, he was like the first public figure to begin speaking against Vietnam, but also, remember, message to the grassroots. He was jumping on Black people for being nonviolent. And he said, how are you going to be nonviolent here, as violent as you were in Korea in World War II? Okay, that Malcolm was pointing out the contradiction. You have a lot of Black people that say that they love Martin Luther King because he was nonviolent, but then you're in the United States military, okay, which, you see the contradiction? Okay, so, you still have Black people that have, that actually share this concern. Okay, so moving on to number 6. No, I'm sorry, no, we're moving on to number 7, okay? And we're gonna end momentarily. Okay, no, I'm sorry, I thought the screen was loading. It says, we want an immediate end to police harassment, brutality, and murder of Black people. We want an end to Black on Black violence, snitching, cooperation, and collaboration with the oppressor. Now, it is amazing how these issues that the party was dealing with over 50 years ago, police harassment, Black people are still dealing with. Of course, this is a major issue. New York City has a new mayor, Eric Adams. He was elected on New Year's. Mayor Adams, he had actually helped found the Guardians, not the Guardians, actually combat police brutality in Black communities. And, throughout the country, there have been various Black police organizations that were started to combat police brutality. But he's recently caught flack. He's recently caught flack from many of the Black activists because of him reinstituting the stop and frisk and undercover officers. And of course, stop and frisk had disproportionately affected Black and Latino men in particular. So, right now, that's a major controversy. My good friend Hawk Newsom, who was the founder of Black Lives Matter in New York, he clashed with Mayor Adams at the time. When he was Mayor-elect Adams and candidate Adams at that time over that, because many people using the excuse that since crime is getting so crazy in these cities, that it's necessary for police to become stricter. Okay, but the original Panther Party, they were very adamant against that, against police brutality, because if you notice, most of these mass shootings are being committed by white men, and most of them end up being taken alive, whereas Black people get shot, as we know, we get shot and killed for doing much, much, much less. Okay, we've seen that not just with George Floyd, but this has been taking place for decades. Okay, we're going to finish reading this here. It says, we believe we can end police brutality in our community by organizing Black self-defense groups, Black people's militias, Black liberation armies that are dedicated to defending our Black community from racist, fascist police, military oppression, and brutality. The Second Amendment of White America's Constitution gives a right to bear arms. We therefore believe that all Black people should unite and form an African United Front and arm ourselves for self-defense. Now, here's the thing. We just finished talking about Dr. King and nonviolence. Oftentimes, when discussing the Black history narrative, Black history comes up, it's Black History Month is coming up, in February, okay? The only people that you usually hear are Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, okay? What most people fail to realize, I'm talking about Black people There were other Black organizations and Black leaders besides Brother Malcolm X and besides the Panther Party that emphasized Black people arming themselves. There were many Black people who did not agree with Dr. King's nonviolent tactics. That's something that we never tell young people or younger people. I'm in that generation where, you keep giving the King narrative, nonviolent, nonviolent, nonviolent. But there were many Black organizations that did not agree with Dr. King or would not have agreed with Dr. King. Okay, you had the Deacons for Defense. See, keep in mind, the concept of Black people defending themselves is not a Black Muslim Malcolm X Nation of Islam thing. There were many Black organizations that did not or would not have supported King's nonviolent position. Okay, every time you start talking about Black people arming themselves, people get nervous. There's a book by a good friend of mine, Akinyele Umoja. He wrote the book called We Will Shoot Back, talking about the Mississippi armed struggle. Oh, thank you very much. Armed struggle. Yeah, we're on right now. We're on point number 7. Keep in mind that you had Deacons for Defense. These are Black Christians, and there was a movie about it with Forrest Whitaker. Of course, I knew about this organization before the movie, but Deacons for Defense, these are Black Christians. They were former World War II and Korean vets, and when the Klan would shoot at them, they would shoot back. Okay, there were a lot of Black people that were shooting back at the Klan. Okay, that's a new thing. One of the main reasons why the civil rights movement, in terms of Dr. King, Abernathy, and all of them, the integrationists, was so small, is because most Black people were saying, you're not going to spit on me, and I'm not going to hit back. Bill Cosby was one of them. Bill Cosby didn't support directly the civil rights. He said that he didn't support the civil rights movement directly like that, because he said his exact words, you're not going to hit me or spit on me, and I'm not going to hit you back. Okay, a lot of Black people looked at Dr. King like he was crazy. This is something that we don't talk about. Okay, and and I love Dr. Michael Eric Dyson tremendously, but one of my issues with one of my disagreements with Dr. Dyson is that he always takes shots at Brother Malcolm when Malcolm would criticize Dr. King for his nonviolent position. And I wanted to say to Dr. Dyson so bad, Doc, respectfully speaking, there were many Black people that criticized Dr. King's nonviolent position. Okay, but before that, before Deacons for Defense, before the Nation of Islam, you had a group called the African Blood Brotherhood. The African Blood Brotherhood. This was another organization that if white racists were to try to kill Black people, they would, shoot them back, kill them back. There were a lot of white people that were being killed by Black people. That's something that's never told. You keep on giving this romanticized version of Black history, but it's amazing to me, these same Negroes that love to romanticize Black history, you notice white people don't have a problem telling their children about armed struggle. We always talk about the Revolutionary War. Okay, Patrick Henry, George Washington, Paul Revere, Thomas Jefferson, Ben Franklin, they got in the Revolutionary War. Bloodshed had to be not established. Bloodshed had to take place in order for the United States to be established. Okay, this is my pet peeve, with black educators, okay, or with bourgeois Negroes. Whenever you're speaking to young people, whenever I've spoken at these assemblies with young people, with high school students, okay, you always have some of the older Black teachers, some of the Black teachers considered older, crossing their arm, twisting their face, and looking at you like you're crazy. Okay, fine. You have a problem with little Black boys and Black girls or Black young people being taught about armed struggle, but then you're in the military. Okay, you're in the military. Let's move on. Okay, so anyway, of course, you had the Black Liberation Army, which was started. That was a subdivision out of the Black Panther Party. At a certain point, the Black Liberation Army had to distance itself from the Black Panther group, the Black Panther organization, because the Black Liberation Army was an underground organization. There's an excellent book written about it. Get the book Black Panther, the Black Panther Party Reconsidered. I forgot who wrote it, but it's still around. It's called the Black Panther Party Reconsidered, and it discusses that. But I know many members of the original who were members of the Black Panther Party and the BLA, Black Liberation Army, but this was nothing new. There had already been armed militia groups defending the Black community since slavery. This is what most people don't know. Okay, we keep giving Black people this romanticized version of Black history, like yes, it was just Dr. King. No, that was new. What Dr. King introduced, that was like a fairly new concept of the pacifist, the nonviolent, which he got from Gandhi. But keep in mind, as Dr. John Henry Clark stated, okay, Gandhi always had a nonviolent alternative. If violent, excuse me, Gandhi had a violent alternative if nonviolence did not work. That's something you never say. It was a tactic, not a lifestyle. Not a lifestyle. Okay. Moving on. 1 second. I'm going on to. Here we go. Point number 8. And family, thank you very much for joining us. I'm Dashan Farad, standing in tonight for the attorney at war, Dr. Malik Zulu Shabazz, who is the chairman of the New Black Panther Party of Self-Defense, as well as the founding executive director of Black Lawyers for Justice, two organizations that are based in the Washington, D.C. area. Point number 8. Tonight I'm going over the 10-point platform of the New Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, which of course comes out of the original, the platform out of the original party. So point number 8 says, we want freedom for all Black men and women held in international, military, federal, state, county, city, and prisons. We believe that all Black people, excuse me, we believe that all Black people and people of color should be released from the many jails and prisons because they have not received a fair and impartial trial. Release means release to the lawful authorities of the Black nation. Now, other communities, keep in mind, the United States is the last country to ever be a moral judge on anyone. A few weeks ago, Riza Islam and Mark Lamont Hill had gotten to a debate over the death penalty. And of course, they were talking about Riza, they were talking about Dylann Roof. And there was something that Mark Lamont Hill said, I know Mark, good brother. He said something that stuck with me, even though I'm gonna be honest with you, I sided with Riza. But there was something that Mark had said during the debate, because Mark, being a leftist, Mark identifies, he's a liberal, but also a leftist. Mark refers to himself as a prison abolitionist. Okay, and I'm quite sure many of my Pan-Africanists and nationalist family will agree. But Mark, Riza was arguing that, yes, Dylann Roof should be killed. But Mark had said, well, what right does and I'm paraphrasing, what right does the United States have to serve as a moral judge with all the evil that is done, especially to us? Okay. So there are many people that feel that, most Black folk that are being held in prison are held there unjustly. So what this is saying is that, and it's funny because I heard Minister Farrakhan say this in 1993 when I was 16 years old, when he spoke at the Jacob Javits Center in New York City. He said, let us, our brothers and sisters that are deviant or wayward, let us teach them. He said, let us reform them. He said, you can't, we don't want you executing them. Let us deal with them, and if they don't get themselves together, we'll deal with them. Okay. So this right here, a lot of nationalists, a lot of prison abolitionists who may not consider themselves Pan-Africanists and may not be affiliated with the New Black Panther Party, they actually agree with this right here. They actually agree with this. Okay, but other communities have ways of dealing with their own. Okay, other communities have other ways. They don't go to outside help. They don't go to outside help, but other communities, have ways of dealing with their own, of course. And as we know, a friend of mine, oftentimes we talk about Dr. Michelle Alexander wrote the book, The New Jim Crow, a decade ago, discussing the prison industrial complex. But there's a friend of mine, Dr. Byron Eugene Price. He wrote a book 5 years before that in 2006, might have been 2005, called Merchandising Prisoners. And that book right there, it actually goes more in depth than Dr. Alexander's book. He actually, he explains how this whole idea of merchandising prisoners, it goes back to the Roman times and even back to Persia. But right now, in the 21st century, it has, it has, of course, it definitely has racial implications. But his book precedes Dr. Alexandra's by 5 years. And when you read Dr. Alexandra's book, it can be argued that maybe she borrowed a lot of her points from Dr. Price's book. Okay, but this whole concept about Black people being held unjustly, this actually relates to our political prisoners. Okay, I've been following the Mumia Abu Jamal case for quite some time. Earlier, I mentioned Imam Jamil Al-Amin. In New Jersey, they're dealing with Sundiata Okoli. He was the one that was captured with Sister Sada Shakur and Zaid Shakur in New Jersey, falsely accused of taking part. He was falsely accused of killing a New Jersey state trooper. The trial was a kangaroo court, and remember, the People's Army had to rescue her because she would have been killed in prison. Okay, they sent the helicopter. She ended up in Cuba, and of course, Cuba has been a sanctuary for many of our Black political prisoners. So we say free them all. Mumia Abu Jamal, definitely look up his case. But I want you, when you get a chance to, family, look up the Jericho movement. Jericho, like the Jericho is a city in the Bible. The Jericho movement. Okay, this organization lists all the political prisoners that are serving time. All the political prisoners that are serving time. The Jericho movement. I think their site is the jerichomovement.org or .com, but Google it, Jericho movement. It'll pop up. But it provides the names and addresses of our brothers and sisters who are still languishing in prison. Of course, recently we had members of Move 6 organization out of Philadelphia. Mumia Abu Jamal, one of the reasons he was framed is because he was investigating the Philadelphia police harassment of the Move organization. Look up the Move organization. Look up Jalil Muttaqin. Okay, we are our own liberators. He wrote a book. He was released, and I think they tried to get him on a parole. Recently, they tried to get him on a parole violation. They tried to bring him back. But look up the plight of Black political prisoners. But once again, look up the Jericho movement. And point number 9 is actually dealing with, point number 8, is actually dealing with the plight of our political prisoners. And many Black political prisoners are original Panthers. Many of them, Mumia was a Panther. Okay, Huey P. Newton served time as a political prisoner. The Free Huey campaign. Bobby Seale served as a political prisoner. But so many of them, okay, across the country. Jamil Al-Amin, remember, original Panther, he's currently serving time. We're going to move on as we get ready to wind down. Point number 9, we want all Black people, family, we want all Black people, when brought to trial, to be tried in a court by a jury of their peer group or people from their Black communities as defined by white law of the Constitution of the United States. We believe that the court should follow their own law if their nature will allow, as is stated in their Constitution of the United States, so that Black people will receive fair trials. The 6th Amendment of the United States Constitution gives a man and woman a right to an impartial trial, which has been interpreted to be a fair trial, we put that in quotes, by one's peer group, quote. A peer is a person from a similar economic, social, religious, geographical, environmental, historical, and racial background. To do this, the court will be forced to select a jury from the Black community from which the Black defendant came. We have been and are being tried by all white juries that have no understanding of the average reasoning person of the Black community. Something that Attorney Shabazz has said before. Black people, African Americans, when you get these jury notices, serve on juries, okay? Don't avoid them, because it's important that our people, receive fair trials. But when you get these jury notices, investigate, but make sure that you serve in these juries with our people, because we want to make sure that they are given just trials. That's something that Attorney Shabazz said a long time ago. Okay, don't avoid it. Check out the case. Don't try to find an excuse, because it might be someone, for example, that brother Khalid Browder. I don't want to use him as an example, but because I don't think, he never saw a jury, but he ended up getting, he was at Rikers Island. He was accused of stealing a backpack, and the abuse that he got at Rikers Island, eventually he was let go because the case was nonsense. He ended up killing himself. But we have to make sure that in cases like that, whether it be murder trials or petty thief or arson, whatever, we have to make sure that that our people, if a rich white woman, okay, from Beverly Hills steals something, okay, we want to make sure that just like she gets 5 years, a sister from Beverly Hills, same economic background or lower economic background, also gets 5 years. You get what I'm saying. So this is why it's important that we have a revolutionary-minded Black jurors to serve on these juries. Don't avoid the notices now. Don't avoid the notices. Okay, it's important for us to, and also to family. This is why, we need more Black attorneys. So make sure to support the organization, Black Lawyers for Justice and the National Bar Association. Okay, now, not to be confused, just to let you know, you have the American Bar Association. That's primarily white lawyers. But then you have the National Bar Association. And, that's for Black lawyers. And then, of course, you have Black Lawyers for Justice, and then you have the National Black Lawyers of America. If I'm saying it right, I believe it's National Black Lawyers of America. But you definitely have Black Lawyers for Justice, which was founded by Attorney Malik Zulu Shabazz. Okay, so my thing is, if you're thinking about going to graduate school and you're Black and revolutionary minded, consider going into law school, not just to be a defense attorney. We need some revolutionary minded Black prosecutors to make sure that, that we're all going to jail or getting the same sentence. You understand where I'm coming from? We have to have revolutionary Black prosecutors. Brothers and sisters, don't jump on the Black, don't criticize a Black prosecutor, because you have a lot of prolific Black prosecutors and Black and Black judges across the country that make sure that the law is carried out equally and fairly. So, we have to be very careful. Don't call everyone a sellout. Stop calling everyone a boule Negro. Okay, a lot of us do that within the conscious movement. We accuse everyone of being a sellout, even Black defense attorneys. No, we have to encourage. If you're able to go to law school and if you're Black and you're able to go to law school, we encourage you to apply to law school, because we need you in these courts. Making sure, we've had many attorneys. Keep in mind, many of us know Attorney Malik Zulu Shabazz. We call him the attorney at war. But the first one to have that title was Brother Alton Maddox out of New York City. Brother Alton Maddox. He was the first one to have that title. Okay, Attorney Malik Zulu Shabazz, he comes in that tradition. Okay, Alton Maddox become well acquainted with him. Unfortunately, he was disbarred. He was involved with the Tawana Brawley case and Reverend Al Sharpton, and he actually lost his license behind that. But he was the first attorney of war. But throughout our history, we've had many Black revolutionary attorneys. Okay, make sure. So we're encouraging you. But anyway, family. Okay, we're going to end with point number 10 because we got to go. We have maybe 2 minutes left. Okay, so point number 10. And once again, this actually goes back to what we've been discussing with having revolutionary attorneys, defense attorneys, and revolutionary prosecutors and revolutionary judges. We demand an end to the racist death penalty as it is applied to Black and oppressed people in America. We demand freedom for all political prisoners of the Black, red, and brown nation. Wow, I just touched on that in point number 9. Free them all, free them all. We want land, bread, housing, education, clothing, justice, and peace. And as our political objective, we want national liberation in a separate state or territory of our own, here or elsewhere, a liberated zone, New Africa or Africa, and a plebiscite to be held throughout the Black nation in which only we will be allowed to participate for the purposes of determining our will and divine destiny as a people. Free the land, up you mighty nation. You can accomplish what you will. Black power. Now, family, there were various organizations that touched on that. Black Muhammad, the Provisional Government of the Republic of New Africa. We missed Dr. Omari Overdeli, Ibaye, Ashe.
Excuse me, brother.
Yes, sir.
You can take your time.
Okay, family.
All right.
I appreciate it, brother. But on this topic here, it's point number 10. History has proven that the white man is absolutely disagreeable to get along with in peace. No one has been able to get along with the white man. That once again is Elijah Muhammad's teaching, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's teaching, Master Elijah Muhammad. All the people of color have been subjected to the white man's wrath. We believe that his very nature will not allow for true sharing, fairness, equity, and justice. Therefore, to the red man and woman, to the yellow and to the brown, we say to you, the same rabid dog that bit you, bit us too. All power to the people. You know, Brother Malcolm spoke on this after he came back from Mecca. He spoke about a world revolution that included all Black people. And Malcolm said in this speech, I believe it was 64, 65, it was after he came back from Mecca. Even though by that time, Malcolm had said many negative things about Elijah Muhammad, he was still borrowing heavily from Elijah Muhammad's teaching, and of course, from Garvey's teaching, by saying that Malcolm specified, he said that when he says Black, and of course, there are many people within the Pan-Africanist and conscious circles that would disagree with Malcolm, that Black would be anyone that isn't white. When he spoke about that revolution, of course, you see that here in point number 10. Something I wanted to address. Here we go. Okay, yes, the plebiscite. Now, what is a plebiscite? A plebiscite is like a discussion, like a vote, in which we decide, or, should we separate or should we not? See, the thing that gets me, as I said at the beginning of the broadcast, or in the middle of the broadcast, whenever I'm at these whenever I attend these meetings that are put on by Black professionals, whenever you mention the idea of separating from America, separating from the Democratic Party, separating from the Republican Party, separating from America, AKA separating from white people, and you don't even have to say separate from white people, but they know what you're talking about, or assume that's what you mean, you get tremendous pushback, which it brings us to our psychological dependence on whiteness, we as Black people. And oftentimes, organizations or the philosophies of organizations such as the Black Panther Party, New Black Panther Party, Nation of Islam, Republic of New Africa, the All African Revolutionary People's Party, that is obscured. Watch what happens next month when Black History Month comes around. And with the exception of Black folk like us that subscribe to this, watch the attempt to not mention anything about Black nationalism. And when they do mention Black nationalism, they only mention Brother Malcolm. And what do they say about Malcolm? Oh, Malcolm believed the white man is the devil, or white people are devils. He went to Mecca, saw white people, and he decided to embrace white people as his brothers, okay? Because Malcolm is the face of Black nationalism, but they use him to discredit Black nationalism. What they don't say about Malcolm X's 1964 trip to Mecca is that afterward, okay, but that was his most important trip as a Muslim, making Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca. But it was his most important trip as a nationalist and as a Pan-Africanist. This is when he met with the African heads of state. They don't talk about that. We only talk about Mecca, white people. Malcolm meets with the African heads of state. He addresses, as an observer, he addresses, I believe, a meeting of the Organization of African Unity, which was started in Ethiopia. And one of the co-founders of that movement was His Excellency Haile Selassie Ashe, and of course Kwame Nkrumah. Malcolm gets the idea to form the Organization of Afro-American Unity, the charter of which was written by he and Dr. John Henry Clark on the floor of Dr. Clark's house in Harlem, okay? So although Malcolm, he mentions he saw white Muslims, but that trip abroad, which by the way, that wasn't Malcolm's first time visiting Africa or the so-called Middle East. As the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's national representative, Malcolm had been traveling back and forth to the Islamic world into Africa. He did it a few times. Okay, Malcolm spoke about that. Okay, but it merely enhanced, it increased his nationalism, his Pan-Africanism. Okay, and that's why he formed the Organization of Afro-American Unity. Make no mistake about it, Malcolm X was not an integrationist. You keep pushing the whole idea of integrationist in the whole Black narrative. There are many Black people that don't believe in integration or assimilationism. Okay, there are many Black people who believe in Pan-Africanism and Black nationalism, separating. Malcolm was still a Black nationalist. He was still a Pan-Africanist. Just read his autobiography. He said that, that my first concern is the people that I come from at that time, the 30 or so, the 20 or so million Afro-Americans who were being oppressed. And so family, it looks like, brother, that's about all I can say. I hope that you all were very satisfied by my presentation. I wonder if we have any comments. Anyone on Facebook? Facebook Live, let me see. Do we have any questions?